in the middle of 1946, where he writes that if Subhash comes back at the head of a Russian army, Gandhiji cannot justify it neither to the Congress nor to the countrymen. It was essential for the establishment to keep Subhash dead. That's the first time Indians got to know about INA and Netaji, what Netaji had done. When the INA soldiers are put on trial, there is a revolt in the Royal Indian Air Force first. Immediately following that, there is a massive revolt in the Royal Indian Navy. The British realize that they have lost the loyalty of the main pillar of capturing India. But then in 1937, Mahatma Gandhi decides that for that year, there is no one else to be nominated as president. He writes to Sardar Patel in a letter that I don't find Subhash trustworthy at all. And 15th August is a matter of shame because that date was not chosen by our leaders. We didn't choose them. It was chosen by Mountbatten because that was the date of surrender of Japan.
नमस्कार मित्रों, आज मेरे साथ दो मेहमान हैं। आप उनके नामों से परिचित होंगे ऐसा मैं मानता हूं। मेरे बाएं तरफ चंद्रचूड़ घोष जी बैठे हैं। चंद्रचूड़ घोष साहब ने बहुत सारा काम किया है नेताजी की बायोग्राफी पे। कई किताबें लिखी हैं। एक किताब मैं अभी पढ़ ही रहा हूं, द इनकन्वीनियंट नेशनलिस्ट करके है नेताजी के ऊपर। बहुत रोचक किताब है और उसमें बहुत सारी ऐसी जानकारियां हैं जो मेरे जैसे आदमी को, जो मानता है कि हिंदुस्तान की राजनीति को समझता है, मुझे भी नहीं पता थी। मेरे दाएं तरफ अनुज धर साहब बैठे हैं। इन्होंने अपना लगभग पूरा जीवन नेताजी की जो मिस्ट्री ही कहूँगा, उसको अनरावल करने में अथक परिश्रम किया। अथक परिश्रम इसलिए कहता हूँ कि हमारी सरकार ने, जो विगत की सरकार रही है 1947 से लेके, उन्होंने कोई मदद उसमें नहीं की, बल्कि मैं ये कहूँ तो अतिशयोक्ति नहीं होगी कि अड़चनें ही डाली इनके काम में और उसकी सत्यता पता न चले इसके लिए बाधा ही बनी सरकारें। और सिर्फ यहाँ की सरकार नहीं, और भी जगह की विदेशों की सरकारों में भी इनको बहुत सहयोग मिला हो ऐसा नहीं है। तो इन्होंने अपने व्यक्तिगत प्रयास से इन्होंने ये काम किया है और मैं इसके लिए मानता हूँ कि इस तरह के लोग बहुत कम होते हैं। तो मेरे दोनों तरफ जो दोनों बैठे हैं, ये नेताजी के प्रेमी, भारत की सत्यता को जानने के अन्वेषी, और हम लोग भी इसी काम में लगे हैं। एक अरसे से हमारा भी यही प्रयास है कि भारत का जो नैरेटिव पिछले 70-75 साल से बनाया गया है, वो नैरेटिव में खोट है। खोट ही नहीं, वो एक गलत नैरेटिव हम लोगों को परोस दिया गया और हम उसको मानने लगे हैं। और अनुज धर साहब और चंद्रचूड़ घोष साहब, इन जैसे लोगों ने इसमें मदद की है कि एक सच्चाई सामने आए। तो इसलिए मैं इनका बहुत शुक्रगुजार हूँ और आज हम लोग एक फ्री व्हीलिंग इनसे बातचीत करेंगे और ये जानने का प्रयास करेंगे कि इनके काम की प्रेरणा सबसे पहले कहाँ से मिली, ये मैं जानना चाहूँगा दोनों से। तो बारी बारी से पहले घोष साहब आप बताएं।
जी, एक्चुअली मैं तो बंगाल से हूँ। तो बंगाल में आप जानते हैं कि सुभाष चंद्र बोस एक ऐसा आइकन है जो इंस्पिरेशन है। हर किसी के घर पे आप चले जाइए, उनका फ़ोटो लगा हुआ मिलेगा आपको। बट मैं पहले ज़माने की बात जब कर रहा हूँ, जब मेरे बचपन में मेरे फैमिली से मुझे बहुत इंस्पिरेशन इसका मिला, क्योंकि मेरे ग्रैंडफादर जो थे वो एक फ्रीडम फाइटर थे। तो वो 16 साल की उम्र में देशबंधु चित्तरंजन दास के अंडर नॉन कोऑपरेशन मूवमेंट में ज्वाइन किया, जेल गए उस टाइम पे, और पढ़ाई जब किए वही स्कॉटिश चर्च कॉलेज में पढ़े जहाँ पे सुभाष बोस ने पढ़ाई किया था। तो वो 3 साल जूनियर थे सुभाष चंद्र बोस के। तो जब बाद में फॉरवर्ड ब्लॉक बनाया बोस ने, तो मेरे ग्रैंडफादर भी कांग्रेस छोड़ के फॉरवर्ड ब्लॉक ज्वाइन कर लिया, एकदम शुरू से फॉरवर्ड ब्लॉक के साथ थे। तो ये जो कनेक्शन है, ये कनेक्शन ने काफ़ी बड़ा रोल प्ले किया था। तो नेताजी के संबंधित जो लिटरेचर है वो मैं बचपन से पढ़ रहा हूँ, उनके बारे में जो डिस्कशन है वो डिस्कशन मैं बचपन से सुन रहा हूँ। तो एक आइडिया सा बन गया था। फिर ऐसा हुआ कि 98-99 में एक कमीशन ऑफ इंक्वायरी बनाया गया टू फाइंड आउट नेताजी का एक्चुअली क्या हुआ था। मौत हुई थी 1945 18 अगस्त में या नहीं, अगर मौत नहीं हुई तो क्या हुआ। तो एक नया फ्रेश कमीशन बनाया गया, तो उसका काम शुरू हुआ, तो उसको लेकर थोड़ा फिर इंटरेस्ट वो जाग उठा, पुराना इंटरेस्ट। तो उस टाइम पे हिंदुस्तान टाइम्स जो न्यूज़पेपर था दिल्ली से, एक ऑनलाइन वर्जन, एक पैरेलल इन्वेस्टिगेशन शुरू किया अराउंड 99-2000 से। तो उस पैरेलल इन्वेस्टिगेशन में मुझे पता नहीं था, तब मैं अनुज को नहीं जानता था, तो अनुज वाज प्लेइंग अ लीडिंग रोल एज अ रिपोर्टर, एज एन इन्वेस्टिगेटर। तो बहुत हद तक उनका जो फाइंडिंग था वो अनुज का फाइंडिंग है। तो वो मैं पढ़ता था और वो जो आया निकल के कंक्लूजन आया कि वो भारत वापस आए थे, पर पढ़ के उस टाइम पे जो इम्प्रेशन मिला कि भारत वापस आए थे पर सन्यासी के रूप में रह गए और बाहर पब्लिक लाइफ में नहीं आए। तो ये मुझे बात कुछ हजम नहीं हुई, मुझे बहुत, आई वाज वेरी डिसगस्टेड टू रीड दिस काइंड ऑफ, आई थॉट दिस इज अनदर कंस्पिरेसी थियरी, वही मतलब घिसा पीटा स्टोरी को प्रोलॉन्ग करने के लिए बनाया जा रहा है, जस्ट टू गेट सम पब्लिक इंटरेस्ट रिस्पॉन्स, सेंसेशनलाइज द होल इशू। बाद में उसके बाद मैं यूके चला गया, तो यूके में रहते हुए अनुज का जो पहली किताब आया,
While you were studying there.
while I was studying there, तो अनुज का पहला किताब आया बैक फ्रॉम डेड। तो बैक फ्रॉम डेड पढ़ा मैंने, पढ़ के मुझे लगा कि ये लॉजिकल एक्सप्लेनेशन तो है और फैक्चुअल काफ़ी सारी चीज़ें हैं, which me belonging to a family of revolutionaries, I knew the connections and the characters involved. तो फिर हमने ऐसा किया कि वी स्टार्टेड डिस्कसिंग इट ऑनलाइन कि क्या क्या हो सकता है, क्या नहीं हो सकता है। फिर ये करते करते जस्टिस मुखर्जी का जो इन्वेस्टिगेशन चल रहा था वो एंड तक आ गया, और जब ख़त्म हुआ और रिपोर्ट में पाया गया कि जस्टिस मुखर्जी ने नाकार दिया है उनकी मौत की जो स्टोरी है, और उन्होंने बोला कैटेगरिकली विथ एविडेंस बोला कि ऐसी कोई प्लेन क्रैश ही नहीं हुआ था, तो उनकी मौत की कोई सवाल ही नहीं है। तो सरकार ने उसको विदाउट एनी रीज़न रिजेक्ट कर दिया। तो तब हमें लगा कि ये केस तो ख़त्म, क्योंकि कोई इंटरेस्ट वाइडर सोसाइटी में कोई इंटरेस्ट नहीं मिल रहा था। तो वो हमारा स्टार्टिंग पॉइंट था। हमने वहाँ से हम बात करेंगे, जैसे आगे बात करेंगे और बताएंगे इसके बारे में, जो ट्रांसपेरेंसी कैंपेन हमने शुरू किया टू ब्रिंग आउट डॉक्यूमेंट्स इनटू द पब्लिक डॉक्यूमेंट, बिकॉज सारे डॉक्यूमेंट सीक्रेट थे नेताजी रिलेटेड। तो वो करते करते जब मिस्ट्री को हम इन्वेस्टिगेट कर रहे थे, तो मुझे इंटरेस्ट जो था नेताजी के बारे में जानने का, वो और पढ़ाई मैंने शुरू किया, डॉक्यूमेंट्स खोजने लगे, जो डॉक्यूमेंट्स मिलने लगे उसको पढ़ने लगे। तो मुझे ये एहसास हुआ कि नेताजी का डिसअपीयरेंस जितना बड़ा मिस्ट्री है, उनका लाइफ इज़ एन इक्वल मिस्ट्री। और इसमें जो पॉलिटिकल फिलोसॉफी का स्ट्रगल, द क्लैश ऑफ आइडियाज़ जो छिपा है, वो कभी उभर के सामने आया नहीं। सो दैट इज़ व्हेन आई डिसाइडेड दैट दिस इज समथिंग विच हैज़ टू बी डन, क्योंकि इसको अगर हम इस्टेब्लिश नहीं करेंगे तो मिस्ट्री के पीछे राज क्या है वो पूरी तरह से कभी एक्सप्लेन नहीं कर पाएंगे।
So you got into this fray, and which year?
This was in 2004. 2004 is when we started discussing online and all. 2005 में हमने एक प्रेशर ग्रुप बनाया मिशन नेताजी के नाम पे। तो मैं यूके में था, अनुज दिल्ली में, और हमारे दोस्त बाकी कुछ दिल्ली में थे, कुछ त्रिवेंद्रम में। तो ऐसे करके पूरे दुनिया भर में थे, कुछ लोग यूएसए में थे, कुछ ऑस्ट्रेलिया में, इंग्लैंड में भी और भी लोग थे। तो ऐसे बनाया, बट हमने 5 लोग मिलके इसको एक मिशन नेताजी करके ग्रुप बनाया।
राइट। सो अनुज, मैं आपसे भी थोड़ा जानना चाहूँगा बहुत ब्रीफ में कि व्हाट गॉट यू इनटू दिस रिसर्च।
पवन जी, मेरा बैकग्राउंड चंद्रचूर जैसा नहीं है, पॉलिश नहीं है और इतना अच्छा भी नहीं है। मैं एक्सीडेंटली इस पूरे इशू में आया। एक छोटा सा कनेक्शन ये था कि मैंने अपने दादा को कभी देखा नहीं ज़िंदगी में, तो उनकी फ़ोटोग्राफ्स देखा था बहुत सारी, मेरी शक्ल उनसे बहुत मिलती है। तो दादाजी मेरे ब्रिटिश इंडियन आर्मी में थे, फ़ौज में थे, और जब बचपन में बड़े हुए तो बचपन सुनते आए थे उनसे कि अफ्रीका में लड़ने के लिए गए थे। उसके बाद से उनको बोला कि जापानियों से लड़ने जाना है, तो वो कोहिमा में जो CBI थिएटर जो बोलते हैं, चाइना बर्मा थिएटर जो उनका था, उनका अलाइड फोर्सेस का, वो वहाँ पे वो गए होंगे। और वहाँ जाकर के मुझे बताया गया बचपन में, घर वालों ने, बड़ों ने बताया कि वो उन्होंने वहाँ जाके उनको मालूम चला, क्योंकि उस टाइम भारत में नेताजी जब 41 में यहाँ से निकले थे तो सेंसरशिप लग गई थी। उस ज़माने में तो इंटरनेट, TV सब था नहीं, सिर्फ न्यूज़पेपर हुआ करते थे। तो एक बार सेंसरशिप लगा दी तो लोगों के पास में कोई जानकारी थी नहीं कि सुभाष बोस क्या कर रहे हो, और वो किसी को नहीं मालूम था कि एक आज़ाद हिंद फौज नाम की सरकार या आज़ाद हिंद फ़ौज है या आज़ाद हिंद सरकार वहाँ काम कर रही है और वो कोहिमा पे अटैक कर रहे हैं, कुछ भी हो रहा है। इनको भी नहीं मालूम था, इनको बोला गया था कि आप जाके लड़ाई करेंगे जापानियों के साथ में। वहाँ पहुँचते हैं तो वहाँ पे उनको लाउड स्पीकर से आवाज़ आती है दूसरी तरफ से कि आप हमसे क्यों लड़ते हैं, हम तो आपके भाई हैं। तो जो मुझे बताया गया घर में कि इन्होंने लड़ने से मना कर दिया लोगों ने वहाँ पे कि लड़ाई नहीं करेंगे। मेरा ग्रैंडफादर वाज मिसिंग इन एक्शन फॉर 3-4 days, so for a week about, I'm sorry, more than that, 3 people got missing in action. My grandfather was presumed dead. My dadi became vidwa for some time. So it was a big tragedy. Any family which has this kind of an experience, usually at least for 2 generations, people don't forget this thing. So उसके बाद में, लेकिन he came back from the dead and he was like he lost his health because he had to eat grass to survive. 2 people died. तो मुझे बचपन से ये हल्का सा आइडिया था. I was not a studious person all my life. If I told you how many marks I scored in history, you would probably not continue this interview. एंड बट मुझे बचपन से ये हल्का सा आइडिया था कि भारत के आज़ाद होने में सुभाष बोस की भूमिका नंबर 1 है, क्योंकि अंग्रेज इस देश पे राज कर रहे थे भारत की फ़ौज को इस्तेमाल करके, और उसी फ़ौज की वजह से फ़ौज के अंदर सुभाष बोस की वजह से देश की फ़ौज में अंग्रेज़ों के खिलाफ में वो रिवोल्ट की नौबत आ गई थी. दैट वाज द बैकग्राउंड, नथिंग एल्स, एवरीथिंग वाज एक्सीडेंटल. तो मैं कोई बहुत ज़्यादा इंटरेस्टेड भी नहीं था, कुछ ज़्यादा मुझे पता भी सुभाष बोस के बारे में था. इनकी तो खैर इनके दादाजी उनके साथ में थे. आई हैड नो कनेक्शन. मेरे जब मैं पैदा हुआ मेरे पिताजी क्लर्क थे, बाबू कॉलोनी में रहते थे, नॉर्मल गवर्नमेंट स्कूलों से पढ़े, सब कुछ हुआ नॉर्मल. और इट वाज जस्ट एन एक्सीडेंट कि मैं हिंदुस्तान टाइम्स में नौकरी कर रहा हूँ. थोड़ा सा इंटरेस्ट हुआ था सुभाष बोस को लेकर कि वो उस टाइम मुखर्जी कमीशन काम कर रही थी, तो सीनियर ने बोला कि आप इस पर एक इन्वेस्टिगेशन करते हैं और इस पर काम करेंगे, और उसमें लग गया. अब वो करते 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 कुछ और भी माहौल उस टाइम पे, कुछ अपनी पर्सनल भी ऐसी सिचुएशन बनी कि वो करते करते मैं उसमें अंदर घुसता चला गया. और वहाँ पे जाकर के जो टर्निंग पॉइंट आया कि हम सब लोगों ने 4-5 लोगों की टीम थी, ये कंक्लूजन में सीनियर लोग थे मेरे साथ में. सितांशु दास हमारी टीम के हेड थे, वो पुराने नेताजी के बायोग्राफर थे, BBC वगैरह में काम कर चुके थे, पुराने बड़े जाने माने पेट्रियट के एडिटर रह चुके थे. तो ही वाज सीनियर जर्नलिस्ट एंड ही हैड अ कनेक्शन टू नेताजी. बंगाली भी थे, वो हमारी टीम के हेड थे. करते करते कंक्लूजन ड्रॉ किया कि प्लेन क्रैश में डेथ की जो कहानी बोली जाती है वो ठीक नहीं है. तो मुखर्जी कमीशन ने हमको हियरिंग के लिए बुलाया. मेरे लिए कोई भी नॉर्मल आदमी, मिडिल क्लास का आदमी या लोअर मिडिल क्लास का आपको बुलाया जाए उनके सामने, कमीशन में गवाही दे, मैं गवाही देने जाता हूँ तो वहाँ देखता हूँ कि प्रणब मुखर्जी भी वहाँ पर हैं. तो वो विटनेस नंबर 48 थे, मैं विटनेस नंबर 50 था. आई थिंक विटनेस नंबर 51 बस कुंवर नटवर सिंह जी, बिकॉज उनकी मैंने गवाही सबकी देखी है. तो बड़ा एक्स्ट्राऑर्डिनरी एक्सपीरियंस है हम जैसे हमारे जैसे लोगों के लिए, इस बैकग्राउंड से, छोटे घर से आने से देखने के लिए. और वो जब हुआ करके तो उस टाइम पे मेरे तो बाकी लोगों ने तो अपना दे मूव्ड ऑन. मैं थोड़ा सा आई बिकेम लिटिल बिट डिप्रेस्ड बिकॉज वंस वी हैव confirmed, we have in a sense that we have confirmed that we have at least the Hindustan Times investigation that Subhash Bose did not die in any plane crash. So then what happened to him? And the only and the dominant view back then was there was this rumors about Netaji being in Russia and dying in a dungeon in Soviet Russia. You must have heard because just about everybody knew about these things in those days. तो बड़ा बुरा लगा कि यार इतना हमारे देश का नंबर 1 फ्रीडम फाइटर, उसने इतना, और वो इतनी बुरी मौत जाके मरा हो रूस में किसी डंजन में. इट्स वेरी सैड. व्हाट डू आई डू? आई एम नोबडी. आई एम नॉट आई वाज बेसिकली डेस्क जर्नलिस्ट. आई वाज नॉट इवन अ रिपोर्टर and I have no access to any means or any this thing. But the only advantage I had the Hindustan Times branding, and I was like in Delhi. Delhi is a place where you have all the secrets. So I took an approach. It was out of sheer desperation, nothing special. There's no great shakes on my part. That suppose I met you, and I somehow you are my friend or somebody. I know you somehow, and I think that you are somebody who has a link in the PMO, and you know somebody. I would ask, do you know somebody in the PMO? You know somebody? Do you have a relative in the IB? Please talk to me about Subhash Bose. Tell me, ask me. I want to know something. So by and by, this is how I began collecting some data here and there. Because people, for example, those especially serving in the intelligence, you cannot get anything out of them. But suppose somebody is in the IB and his daughter were to put him a question. I will probably give you an example of it later when we talk. Similar example coming from the Prime Minister. Obviously, the person cannot dodge his own daughter, or probably even if he or she to dodge, the other person would figure it out. There's something wrong. So by and by, I started getting some inputs. There's something big about this case, but it was not very clear. And one day, by fluke, I can make up stories today, but I will not. It's a fluke. I was just shooting in the dark, and I hit and I was able to reach through some connection, somebody who had seen the files and the highest level. The source was at the highest level, almost like I mean, Deep Throat. You might have heard that Washington Post and Watergate story, and it's almost like that, almost very movie like.
Which year?
This was 2001-ish, and then and then I was given to understand that this is India's best kept secret, and that he was alive, he was in Russia, and then they gave me to understand that the government of India was in touch with him until 1985, and told me certain other things which are very explosive, which I can't possibly talk to you right now. Probably off the camera we'll talk. And I couldn't believe. I couldn't believe. I said, what's this happening? Netaji was dead. One view in 45 in a plane crash in Taiwan, and suddenly, and the other view was that Netaji died in Russia in Stalin's time. Stalin died in 53.
Right.
So either way, it was my grandfather's time. And when you say that we were in touch with him until 85, my God, this comes to my time. This is Rajiv Gandhi's era. And the first thing I did was to just figure out how old was Netaji. Because we talk of Subhash Bose, Netaji, we tend to, we think of him and Gandhi ji and Sardar Patel and Pandit ji in the same breath.
Yeah.
But there's a huge difference. People do not know. Sardar Patel was 22 years older than Subhash Bose. Right. Gandhi ji was probably 29. Chandrachur can tell better.
69, he's 97.
So he's 29 years old. Back in those days, people used to become parents in early 20s. And then, so Morarji Bhai was probably a year older than Subhash Bose, and he became a prime minister in 78. So yes, it's feasible for Subhash Bose to be alive, because if he were there until 85, he would have been 88. So that, since biologically it's not impossible for him to be alive. And since then, and I went to, of course, Mukherjee Commission went to, Ayodhya, where, and there was a hearing, I went there. And from that time and then, of course, Chandrachur and others, we all joined in, and he and I were not childhood buddies. We got together because of this job. When I heard this information from the government sources that he was here, the whole thing has been checked and rechecked and verified and re-verified by Chandrachur and Shayantan and so many people. And people like those in Ayodhya and Calcutta, known to us for like decades now, 2 decades almost. Every month, even last month, we got a new input. Not a single input, not a single thing has come our way, has gone against that story. So we are 100% convinced about whatever I heard in 2001. And because we keep getting updates, and they have verified and re-verified independently.
Right.
So whatever I heard in 2001 was correct according to me, and which has been, over a time period of time checked and rechecked. This is how I came. But my coming, here was completely accidental. As I told you that if I told you how many marks I had in history, you would not like to continue this interview.
Yeah. No, but we are going to have a presentation by both of you in the afternoon, and where you are going to be talking, and you've done a lot of talking about your research work and about your knowledge about Netaji. What I would like to explore here is, from 2001, 2002, you've been involved in doing research, finding out things, and it's a long time. And it's been almost, I wouldn't be wrong if I say that this has been your the biggest passion in your life since for the last 20
Absolutely.
years, right?
Absolutely.
I mean, it has occupied your mind space, so to say. I envisage that someone who
I think it is going to remain with us till we die now. There is no way now.
So someone who does like that, then something happens to the way you perceive things. You start connecting dots. You start seeing things in a different way. This is my assumption. So I want to explore that side of it.
Realization also comes in phases. It does not dawn on you just one fine morning.
Yeah, absolutely. It's a slow, continuous process. Yeah. So what is your feeling? About that. We have only read from books and from magazines and all that there were differences between Netaji and Gandhiji, and of course Nehru and Netaji hardly got along with each other. That is quite, anyone who knows a little bit about Indian history and politics would know this. I mean, this is the perception which is there. But it doesn't still give us that idea that where their difference is so strong that even after his disappearance, I would say, I wouldn't call his death in 45, his disappearance, and it's quite well known now that the government of India knew about it. Why was nothing done? In fact, things were done to the contrary to keep it the way it is. And then my question is, and this is a long question, why did Netaji not come out? Was it because of the persecution by the international agencies only, because he was a war criminal, or was it something deeper than that?
We have to take the question in two parts.
Yeah,
Actually,
yeah,
these
yeah,
are actually
yeah,
two
yeah,
questions.
yeah.
The first part is why the attitude of the Indian political establishment towards Netaji, and the second part is why Netaji did not come out. Both are very complex answers.
Right.
So it will take some time. I will go into the first part. Anuj can add, and when I will ask him to take the second one, and I will add whenever required. So see, one thing is the differences, the attitude of the political establishment in free India, independent India, was not a uh, contemporary attitude. It had built up over years. And it started in the late 1920s when Subhash Bose comes out of Mandalay jail from Burmese prison. He returns. On his return, the, the very next session of Bengal Provincial Congress conference, he is elected the president of Bengal Provincial Congress. And that is 1927, end of 27, 28, early 1928. Before that, in 1927 December, I mean, most people don't know it. When we talk about independence resolution by the Congress, we talk about the Lahore Congress of 1929-30. We don't, most people don't know this, that the first independence resolution was moved by Jawaharlal Nehru in 1927, Madras Congress. So in Madras Congress, Gandhi was not majorly involved. Pandit Nehru moves the resolution that the goal of Congress is complete independence of India. And the resolution is passed. So what happens is this changes the creed of the Congress. And Gandhiji was mightily annoyed, mightily annoyed. He said, how could you do this? This is foolish. And they had a long clash, meeting face to face and through letters.
So pardon my intrusion, but one thing I want to just add to this, what he's saying, the background for the sake of clarity. Panditji and Subhash were very good friends back in 27. So Netaji and Panditji were not at loggerheads until 1936-37. So this time when it was happening, Panditji and Subhash were very good friends.
In fact, I mean, they were not very good friends in 27, 28, but they were coming together. They were getting to know each other. Panditji was a little senior than Subhash in the Congress politics. And under Deshbandhu Chittaranjan, they had been moving around, seeing each other, talking and getting to know each other. And then Subhash goes away to prison, so there is a long gap. So when he comes back, so Mahatma Gandhi is mighty annoyed with this resolution, and he charges Pandit Nehru as to this is a foolish thing. How could you do that? And then Pandit Nehru refuses to step back and say. Then Gandhiji issues the threat that if you believe in this, then it's fine. You go your way, I go my way. Then something happens, which keeps happening, recurring throughout Pandit Nehru's career and Mahatma Gandhi's career. Pandit Nehru completely, abjectly surrenders. He said, no, you are like my father, and how can I go against you? So whatever you say is the final word. He gives in. So that independence resolution gets buried. What Subhash does is he picks up that independence resolution and passes it as the Bengal resolution in 28, March, April. And then he brings it along to the Calcutta Congress. The Congress annual session was held in Calcutta in 1928, December. So there
When Nehru became the president.
No,
right?
that was Motilal Nehru was the president that year. Nehru became the president, Jawaharlal next year.
Oh.
Mahatma Gandhi wanted Jawaharlal Nehru as the president, but Bengal wanted Motilal Nehru because Motilal Nehru was very close to Chittaranjan Das. So they thought that Chittaranjan Das's place could be taken by Motilal Nehru. They pressed for it, and Mahatma Gandhi gave in. So Subhash went hammer and tongs asking for the complete independence. This thing said dominion status cannot be our goal, and that there lies the basic fundamental difference between the two. Mahatma Gandhi was okay with dominion status. Subhash Bose was complete independence, free from British influence. He was not anti-British as is portrayed by many historians and writers. He had many good things to say about the British qualities and everything, and he would give examples in his public speeches. So it was not private, secret, anything, but out of British influence. India should develop on our own and become free on our own and go on our own path without British influence. That was the beginning, and this kept deepening. This divide kept increasing. Then Subhash was again sent out in exile in 1930s. 1933 he went out and spent another 3 years. He had to spend, he was forced to spend in exile in Europe for 3 years. And he was stopped from coming back to India, but he forced his way back. He was forced his way back in 1936 and he was again arrested and thrown back to jail, of course. But then once he comes out of jail, his health is in a very poor state. But then in 1937, Mahatma Gandhi decides that for that year there is no one else to be nominated as president because Pandit Nehru had been president for the previous 2 years. Patel had refused to become the president. So willy-nilly let it be Subhash. There is nobody else for this year. He says that. But at the same time, he writes to Sardar Patel in a letter that I don't find Subhash trustworthy at all. But for this year, there is nobody else. So the idea was to fill in the gap, let him be president, we will control everything, and things will move according to our ideas. And after 1 year, we will reappoint either Pandit Nehru or Maulana Azad or Patel, somebody will come. So what happens in 1938 is Subhash Bose comes in with his set of ideas. In his presidential speech at Haripura, it's a masterpiece, that speech. So he lays out not only the route for the freedom struggle, but he lays out the vision for building independent India. So this is another fallacy, I would say, a very willful lie spread by many writers that Subhash was so engaged about India's winning freedom that he did not have any time to think about free India's development. That's completely bunkum. He had a very detailed thought process. He was a thinker. He was not only a street fighter or a run-of-the-mill politician. He was a thinker, a very well-read, erudite thinker. And he had a vision, proper vision, how India should develop after freedom. So he lays out his vision. And there, in that, he talks about modern ideas. He talks about science and technology. He talks about industrial development of India. Decides for the planning committee to lay the path for India's industrial development. He talks about population control. He talks about education, health, agriculture, rejuvenation of agriculture, financing, how to finance agriculture. So all the issues that we are talking about today, it is kind of eerie. It gives an eerie feeling to read his 1938 speech. He was looking at those particular problems. And now this speech unnerves the Gandhian camp because of moving, they thought that they are moving away from the village industry, the village life kind of thing, idea. And Gandhi, anyway, Subhash is hobnobbing with the revolutionary groups. He's mobilizing. By that time, he had set up youth and student groups, whom he was training in a almost a military fashion. So that was an anathema to the Gandhian camp. So all these things put together, and he was also reaching out to foreign powers. So his 3 years in Europe exile, he utilized that time to build his network in Europe, to get ideas, assimilate ideas. I mean, one of the ideas that he's brought in here was municipal socialism, that municipalities in India should be self-sufficient. They should not depend on outside funds and all. They should be able to generate their own strength, funds, and get the best of talent to develop the towns. And these were not appreciated by the Gandhian High Command. So by end of 1938, it was already decided that he was going, and somebody else will have to be. So Gandhiji had already started sending out feelers to Jawaharlal Nehru, to Maulana Azad, that what about next year? You get in next year. And that time Subhash puts his foot down and says that I have given you a plan. I have laid out a plan for Congress. Give me 1 more year. I need 1 more year to finish the work that I have started. So they tell him, no, you can you are an important leader. So as an important leader, you can carry on work. He said, no, there is a difference. So I have, as a president of the Congress, I have laid out a path, and I need that space to be able to take everyone along with me. And by the time Congress had also gone into power in the provinces after the 1936-37 elections under the new Constitution of India, the India Act of 1935. So he was interacting with the industries ministers, the premiers of the provinces, and discussing with them how to take forward, how to give incentives to industrialists and build new industries. Everything he was discussing. He said, I need all these things. And while this is going on, then in the next Bengal Provincial Congress, he sponsors a new resolution. He says, let's give the British Empire, the British Raj, 6 months ultimatum. In 6 months, if they don't show any sign of leaving India, then we will start a massive movement. And everybody in Congress High Command, starting from Gandhi, goes rabidly against it. They were just not ready to accept it. Gandhiji's talk phrase at this time was that the Indian movement will have to be non-violent, and there is too much violence in the air. India is not prepared, and unless everybody in Congress has become in mind, body, spirit non-violent, I will not start a movement. So there begins the clash. Then this clash turns into a bitter fight, and Subhash is forced to leave Congress. He starts his forward bloc within the Congress, then forward bloc goes out of Congress as a separate party. He starts building a left unity, tries to build a left unity in India. By that time, the World War starts. And when the World War starts, Subhash Bose is the only person who is saying that let's take the opportunity, hit out at the British at their weakest time, and get our own freedom. On the other hand, Gandhiji is meeting Linlithgow, the viceroy at that time, and saying that I can't even bear the thought of the Westminster being bombed. He was crying. Tears were flowing down his cheeks, and these are written in the minutes. So he was choking, he was crying, he was weeping. And so that was the difference. And then Subhash Bose starts building network with the Axis powers through Japan. The Germans are coming and meeting him. And all these things, there is a very funny incident actually. There was a Nazi minister who was deputed to India as a commerce representative. And he has a meeting with Subhash Bose in Bombay. Now the British intelligence spots this. They prepare a report. They send the report to the Premier of Bombay, B.G. Kher, the Home Minister of Bombay, K.M. Munshi. What K.M. Munshi does is he receives the report, he sends it to Gandhiji. So look at the flow of information. The British intelligence, K.M. Munshi, Gandhi. This is how information was flowing. And they are flabbergasted, they are shocked that Subhash is talking to the Germans, because by this time there was a very internationalist, peace-loving spirit which had overtaken, because of Gandhiji's thoughts, overtaken the Congress, that we stand for world peace and we don't care anything about anything, but England has to win the war, the Allies have to win the war, the Axis has to be defeated. They were not bothered that the Axis was actually supporting India's freedom. So Subhash was taking the other stand, that the Axis is supporting us, let's reach out to the Axis, let's reach out to Soviet Union. Soviet Union had signed a pact, an alliance pact with the Axis powers. So he says, well, Soviet Union is with them, they are supporting us, why not reach out to them? So this widens the rift. And then Subhash is thrown to jail because of his aggressive politics, and he realizes that if I stay in the country, I will be rotting in jail as long as the war lasts. So he decides that this is the time. And then he leaves the country. Many people think that he planned the exit sitting in jail, which he was arrested in 1940 July, and he left the country in 1941 January. So many people think that he was planning after July sitting there. No, he was a person who used to always plan much ahead. So he had started planning going out of the country and taking help from foreign powers from 1939 this November. So he had actually planned it for 1 year, sent out his agents to Russian to find out the best route to Russia through Afghanistan, through South China coast, through Japan. His man had gone to Japan, talked to the German embassy there, the Russian embassy there. So everything he had reached out, building his network and trying to zero down on one plan. So then he leaves the country, goes to the Axis, and then the Congress is at the peak of their campaign against the Axis. So they didn't care about India's freedom at that time. They're saying that we are not going to help you with manpower. They were telling the British that we are not going to help you with manpower and resources till the time you are giving us freedom. But as long as you share some power, we are happy to give you our manpower and resources. So we are on your side. So that one has to keep that in mind, that Subhash was not on the side of the Allied powers. He was against them. The Congress was on side of the Allied powers. So all those, the Congress leaders, the bureaucrats who continued to rule India after freedom, they were all on the side of the Allied powers. Subhash was standing alone. And then he does something unthinkable when, because of the Quit India movement, everybody, all Congress leaders are imprisoned. And the whole so-called Gandhian movement turns into a terribly violent underground movement. That underground movement starts supporting Subhash. They make plans that if the Japanese army comes with Subhash at its head, how they will welcome, how they will join the forces and drive the British out. So all these things happening, Subhash was day in, day out becoming a more bitter enemy for them. So Jawaharlal Nehru's well-known quote that if Subhash comes at the head of a Japanese army, I will fight him with a sword. This is a public statement. And so Gandhiji was turning a little soft, hearing, according to Maulana Azad's testimony, that he was so much influenced by his resourcefulness, by his bravery, by his quick thinking. He was turning a little soft. But then he also again went back to his old self. But when 45 came, the war ended. Congress as an organization was completely demolished. There was no organization. There were a few leaders. And the moment they were released, entire focus was on negotiation with the British government on how to get some share of the power. What is the best way to get some share of the power? There was no focus on mass movement. Right at that time, the INA soldiers were being brought in. And as soon as people got to know, Anuj referred to their blackout, the censorship of news of Netaji and INA. That's the first time Indians got to know about INA and Netaji, what Netaji had done. And the soldiers are coming back. They are telling their stories to people. So there was a volcanic eruption throughout the country, across the country. And that wave reaches the Indian soldiers in the British Indian Army. And the British are unnerved. They are seeing something that they could not even imagine. And immediately, as the mass movement starts on the INA trials, when the INA soldiers are put on trial, there is a revolt in the Royal Indian Air Force first. Immediately following that, there is a massive revolt in the Royal Indian Navy. And this spreads. And the British realize that they have lost the loyalty of the main pillar of capturing India, the armed forces, British Indian armies. So at that time, Auchinleck is writing for reinforcements from the home, which is England, and he is writing that send us more troops, but be careful that all of them must be British. The troops must not contain Indians.
They don't trust Indian soldiers anymore.
So that's...
And that's quite well taken, but what I was trying to explore with you was that why such this thing that to keep Netaji under wraps, not to bring him out. I mean, they are working overtime, it seems.
I'm coming to that. I'll just tie up the argument.
This is after post-independence.
Yes, so I'm tying up the thing. So when all these revolutions and mass movements are going on, what are the Congress leaders doing? They are going out, working extra hard to suppress them. They're saying that we are about to get power in our hands, don't create disturbances. Calm down. So the uprising, they stop in the hope that the British will hand over power to them. So there is a negotiation process from 45, end of 45 till 1947, August, when the transfer of power happens. India becomes a dominion. Had Subhash Bose, whatever he stood for, is completely against the process that went on for those 1.5 years or 2 years. So Subhash Bose's ideas were thrown out to the dustbin. We got a negotiated transfer of power on 15th August, and 15th August is a matter of shame because that date was not chosen by our leaders. We didn't choose them. It was chosen by Mountbatten because that was the date of surrender of Japan. So a date of shame for another country was chosen as the date for transfer of power for our country. So all these things, the negotiation, the compromises, Subhash Bose, while he was in Germany and in Southeast Asia, in his broadcast, kept repeating that, telling people that beware of the leaders of Congress, they will compromise at the earliest available opportunity. And that is exactly what happened. They compromised. And so Congress leadership knew that if Subhash Bose comes back, then they stand no chance because Subhash Bose had by that time attained a superhuman image. his popularity was at a scale where nobody came close to him. So everybody was taking his name. Everybody is taking the name of INA soldiers. Everybody is taking his name, utilizing him, exploiting his name. But Sardar Patel writes very interesting letter to the Premier of Orissa at this time. He says, praise the INA by all means.
But
Do
don't.
whatever you can, but don't take the name of Subhash. No need to praise the leader. So the attitude is clear. They have to stop Subhash from coming, because Subhash comes in, they are gone. They have to play a secondary role, a second fiddle. And they knew, or they were not sure at that time, probably they came to know later that he was alive, but at that time they were not even sure that he was dead. Most probably not, because there were many incidents that where he was declared dead and he came back, so he might come back. So that fear and the betrayal, the betrayal always produces guilt. So that sense of guilt, and to preserve the show that we did the best for the country, for that they have to keep Subhash out. Subhash Bose's ideas and activities, everything, if they are given the light of the day, they cannot justify themselves. So that is what a letter written by Gandhiji's secretary to Naushad, Khurshid bin Nauraji, to Louis Fisher, his biographer, in the middle of 1946, where he writes that if Subhash comes back at the head of a Russian army, Gandhiji cannot justify it neither to the Congress nor to the countrymen. So that's the thought process behind it. So it was very important to kill Subhash, to make him disappear, and his thoughts, his ideas, his visions, to make that disappear, to keep him as a peripheral figure, also ran kind of figure. And that continued, that built up even when the government came to know that he was alive in all likelihood, and they did not have a clear idea, they did not have clarity. But it was essential for the establishment to keep Subhash dead.